Mark, do you attribute? What?
Good question to ask.
Anyone can give a presentation. Few deliver unforgettable presentations. What's the difference? You're about to find out. Welcome to the Unforgettable Presentations Podcasts with your hosts, world champion speakers and coaches Mark Brown.
Your life tells a story, and there's someone out there who needs to hear it.
And Darren LaCroix.
Stage time, stage time, stage time.
Ready for some powerful presentation ahas? Let's dive right in.
All right, Mark. I want to frame this because attributing is one thing, but the why to attribute is much more important. And let's just put it this way. One of the things that we preach is the most important part of a presentation is the thought process in the listener's mind. The thought process. What is the audience thinking when you say this? What is the audience thinking when you say this? Hey, wait, I've heard that before. I think Craig tells that story, or Patricia. That's a Patricia line. So one of the reasons, just jumping right into it, Mark, forgive me and just blah.
That's okay.
If I say, hey, one of the most important things is your ending. Why? Because your last words linger. Now that's a Patricia Fripp line. So if you hear me say that, and you've heard Patricia say that, you say, whoa, wait. He's not attributing that to the actual source. Now, we're not going to get into AI and all of that. Check your sources. But if you learn this, it actually can, two things. Number one, it can up your credibility by saying the source. I learned that from Patricia. She's brilliant. Why would I try and reword something that already works?
Right.
So do you attribute? And one of the reasons why is because of credibility. We need to keep our credibility. Hey, we know that you didn't learn everything on your own. You had to learn it from some mentor, from some course, for some book. Now, you might have become a thought leader and have your own thoughts at a higher level. Excellent. Super cool. That's why you should do what you do. But we need to be careful that we attribute, even if it's a cliche, even if you're not sure what the source is or where you heard it. If you just say, look, I can't remember where I heard this, but I heard it say, or heard it said, boom. Now at least you're not claiming it's yours. Mark?
I'm so proud of you, Darren. You're expounding upon a 3-syllable word, attribute. And there may be those who are saying, well, it's a pretty big word. Actually, we use Word Hippo as a tool. It's a dictionary, thesaurus, gives you antonyms, synonyms. And simply put, the verb attribute, according to our Word Hippo thesaurus, is this: to associate ownership or authorship to someone. Simply acknowledging that they are the owner or the author. I happen to have served several different National Speakers Association chapter groups across North America, from Florida to Texas and beyond. And every once in a while, they'll get an academy speaker who will give great information. And they may say, studies show that, a study says that 82% of, or, research says. Now, we teach there are individuals in your audience who are very keen to know who is Mr. Studies, who is Ms. Research, who is so-and-so, because they want to know from whence it has come. Now, if you say, a recent USA Today poll revealed that 82% of presenters, now they've been given the source. You attribute the information to a recent USA Today poll. It could be Barna Research, the Wall Street Journal. Forbes has said, and if you're really high-tech, People Magazine is quoted as saying, whatever the case may be. The point being, it is important for us to properly attribute. Now, there are times, as Darren says, you may not know the source. I will say, and I've often said, the great Roman philosopher anonymous, or Greek, yeah, anonymous, right? And it gets a laugh, but you will often find quotations attributed to ANON period, which means anonymous. We don't know who said it. Here's a thing regarding credibility. When you are able to attribute quotations, statements, stats, details, poll results, and so on, the audience now knows you were diligent enough to do the adequate research to serve them in the best way possible. And by quoting someone like a 15th century philosopher like Sadi, wait, you took time to find out he's 15th century? They will then view you in their mind, Darren says, they see you as someone with the credibility who will do the research to find out that great detail. And when you get the audience to trust your level of detail, you're then almost automatically giving them permission to trust everything else that you say, to truly be qualified as an expert, because proper attribution can serve you well when it comes to your credibility on the quotations, on the song lyrics. And I do want to add one piece on the quotations and song lyrics. This has caused me to cringe once or twice in the last 30 years, where someone would attempt to quote a speaker, a writer, an author, and then they would misquote them, but say it with conviction, even though it's correct. And Darren, I'm going to confess something I've never told you before. But a few years ago, I was reading through a little devotional book where the author used a quotation that was so poorly worded, had 3 or 4 errors in it. I invested the time, Darren. I went to the back of the book. I found out how to contact the author. I don't remember how I got their email. I emailed them a very kind email pointing out the error. And within a day, they responded and said, I had read it somewhere. I thought that was right, but thank you for pointing it out. They were not offended. They were not defensive, even though at times others may be so. They took it gracefully and graciously and promised to amend any further additions. And they actually thanked me for pointing out their error. Not calling upon you to go and check everybody's letters, dots, I's, T's crossed, and go and attack them and confront them. No, we're going to ask you to do what we do. Look in the mirror first. I double check and triple check. I go to Goodreads. I go to all the different quote sites. I'll check at least 3 quotation sites to make sure I get the quotes right. If I quote song lyrics, I'll go online. I'll go to websites that have the song. They may even have a hard copy, copies of the actual score, but I want to verify the lyrics. If it's a poem, there are many people we know who use poems. If you're going to use a poem, make sure you quote correctly. And please, please, please make sure to attribute the words, be it Henry Wadsworth Longfellow or Yoda, please be sure to attribute. There will be individuals in your audience who are going to check you and check on you. And if they think you steered them wrong, all the value you gave becomes null and void, because now they're saying, I can't trust you. If that was not correct, how can I be sure anything else you say is correct? As Darren says, you can go high, paraphrase, or you can go low with credibility, depending on how you attribute or fail to do so.
Yeah, I saw a Toastmaster speech contest where someone was talking about on a mountain, there's a trailhead and there's a sign at the beginning of the trailhead. And they said, the trailhead says da, 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 da. And someone in the audience later said, that's not what that sign says.
Ooh.
And now, so again, thought process in the listener's mind. That person lives in that area, knows that sign. So now that person thinks, well, if they're going to make that up, what else did they make up? What else did they not check? And Mark, just for the record, when you said from whence it came, I tried to look up whence and I spelt it wrong.
It's whence. And it's an H in it there. Whence.
I didn't have an H in it, but anyway, I had to look it up from whence. I was like, whence.
And you went to Word Hippo, our favorite tool.
I did.
And real quickly, Darren, let's just digress for a second and just kind of let our listening audience know what is across those tabs at the top. the different options that Word Hippo can provide to help you to make sure your quotes are correct. You've got synonyms, antonyms, definitions, rhymes, sentences. I can't read the rest, and my eyes are too.
Translation, find words, word forms, and pronunciation.
It's a powerful tool, and it can also help you to make sure you spell correctly when you're using those quotes. But I recommend seriously use online tools to verify and double, triple check quotations, lyrics, who was the source. And here's where it gets tricky, Darren. There have been certain quotations that have been attributed to different individuals. If you insist on using it, invest more time, dig a little deeper. For example, there's one quotation I have used. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. Now, we're recording this podcast live and spontaneously. I'm going to give Darren an assignment while I'm talking to you live. Darren, if you check the quote, life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans. Why? I first heard that quote, life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans, in a film called Mr. Holland's Opus with Richard Dreyfuss. And he had said the words came from a song, Beautiful Boy, by John Lennon. And I verified that.
Boom.
But somehow I began to dig a little deeper. And it turns out John Lennon was not the first one to use a quote of that ilk, of that type. It turns out Alan Saunders, Allen Saunders, Alan Saunders wrote that in the Reader's Digest magazine many years before John Lennon was John Lennon. The question becomes, is it a John Lennon quote or is it an Alan Saunders quote? And I will tell you this, I chose to go with Alan Saunders because, of course, his article in the Digest was, I think, in the 50s or 40s. There are those who will go even deeper. Say a similar quote was written in the 18th century by so-and-so. But I want you all to go down rabbit holes. Maybe I do, just to make sure you encounter an academic who says, Mark, it was not John Lennon. That was actually Alan Saunders, Reader's Digest, April 17, 1957. Whoa. So you see where this can go. I simply want to ask you, high level, do the due diligence and do the research to build your credibility. Darren.
If you don't, you lose your credibility. So only do it if your reputation matters. But if you're going to be an expert on stage, I believe it's our responsibility to do that work. If you're going to quote someone, and now if we use that quote as an example, Mark, you could say, well, a lot of people attribute this to John Lennon, but the original source is. Now you have credibility, and now those people who think it's a John Lennon quote, because if it's often misquoted, I almost want to say a lot of people attribute it to this. Now those person who say, because you don't want them saying, well, it wasn't John Lennon. You don't want them to say it wasn't Alan, it was John Lennon, because he might be the popular person who
correct. Yes.
So you want to acknowledge what common knowledge is, but then show your credibility. But in my research, I found it was actually So that way you're upping your credibility, acknowledging what a lot of people perceive as the original source. And, Mark, I thought about this too. There's several speeches where they quote a Nelson Mandela thing, a Nelson Mandela quote. Yeah. And there's one by Denzel Washington, and there's another one by Marianne Williamson. And sometimes they get misattributed. Now they gave credit to Nelson Mandela, but someone hearing it secondhand heard it from them and give them credit. So look, this is, it may sound like we're going in the weeds, but it's your reputation. Take the time to know. and be aware, what do most people think, but what is the truth? And then you can just say, from my research. And guess what? Someone might say your research is wrong, but at least you're acknowledging that I took the time to look. Now, Mark, I'm going to switch lanes here for a second. I know we're short on time, but I want to acknowledge the other problem. Don't over attribute. Don't over attribute, meaning don't have way too many quotes. And I've been guilty of this, talking about Fripp too much in my presentation. Yeah, I learned a lot from her, for sure. Absolutely, we both did. But people don't want to hear us quote other people throughout our whole speech. Hey, one, maybe two, but look, you're the authority up there. And we see, and I used to do this myself back in the early days in Toastmasters, I would have like 4 different motivational quotes. But what I was really doing is I was still building my confidence. I believe in my own voice. So I use these motivational quotes to bring credibility to my thoughts. And that's wrong. Like, if look, we have a quote book. I don't need you to tell us 12 motivational quotes. And some people say, but you quoted Brian Tracy in your championship speech. Yes. However, I lived my life this way. I heard that quote. Now I live my life this way. So that quote had a direct impact. There's a before and after. That's different. So we want you to attribute. Don't over attribute. It is your credibility. You're the one on stage. We want to hear from your experience. So attribute, but don't overdo it, and research the original sources.
Yeah, Darren, I'm glad you mentioned that point, because I can recall I had a coaching client who was giving a 10-minute speech. Well, 8-minute speech. And in that 8-minute speech, I think they had 7 or 8 separate quotations from quote unquote reputable sources. And you're right. We run the risk, particularly when we're newer speakers, we run the risk of feeling we need to have Mother Teresa or Nelson Mandela or Abe Lincoln or Lech Walesa. We need to have someone of note, but Mohandas K. Gandhi. We need to have their words to prop us up. But you realize that your audience wants to hear your story. They want to glean from your experience. So don't feel you need to have 7, 8, 9 quotations to bolster your idea. Because truth be told, your emotional experiences, your audience will share. They may not share the same physical experience, but they'll share the same emotion. And your life, your story, your experience, your lessons learned, your wisdom will benefit them as well. So yeah, you don't want to over attribute, but there's also one caution. This is probably the most serious one I want to share with you. And it's this: be very, very careful when using someone else's words not to come across as if they are your own words, because then in the listener's mind, you're crossing the line into plagiarism. Sometimes that can be unintentional, which means part of all our work is to do the research, be very careful. Do I need to attribute? And if so, do so clearly. If I were to start walking around giving talks all over the world saying, I am a firm believer, I'm a firm believer, for you to be a good speaker, you need to have stage time, stage time, stage time. I am directly quoting Darren LaCroix, but I'm saying I am a firm believer in essence, I am claiming what is not mine. That is Darren's brand, and that is known around the world. And if I say that in the audience's mind, it could be a problem. How do I know this? Unfortunately, I had an experience where I got a message, a DM from another continent, South Africa. I'd been to a conference there and I spoke there, and the individual sent me a message saying, I'm at an event, a 2-day event. I'm prepared to leave right now, day 1. Because, Mark, I don't know what to do. The speaker here, who is well known in our part of the world, who makes a lot of money coaching speakers and does seminars, I just heard him tell a story which I know has come from another speaker. Of course, my initial thought was, oh no, what happened? This individual had taken their mobile device and audio recorded the speaker. And they didn't know what to do. I got hold of it. I found out it was true. And the speaker they were quoting is someone Darren and I both know as well. And I passed it on to them. only to find out my friend told me, yeah, that speaker has done it before. I talked to them about it before. They said we had similar stories and is it going to be okay? They would never do it again. Now they've done it again. Two things happened. One, it became a thought in the audience members' mind to the point they wanted to leave the entire program. Because the speaker had lost that much credibility. On the other end, my fellow speaker and I had a conversation. It turns out they were now considering legal action against this person on another continent because the material they used was uniquely that belonged to my speaker friend. So it became a quote unquote a thing. Trust me, friends, you don't want anything you say to become a thing. Even if it sounds close, if it sounds too close, it probably is. Trust me, friends, trust me, your life experience is enough to bring value to your clients. Let them hear your story. Let them learn from your experiences. Let them hear the benefit of your wisdom, your gains, your losses, the lessons that you learned, and let them hear from you. And if perchance you see the need to quote a song lyric, a statement, a word of wisdom, then by all means, attribute those words to the person who first said them. Make sure you get the right ones. And in so doing, you will establish and solidify your credibility as an expert, someone with ethics who is trustworthy. And that way you will continue to have a good reputation among your peers and for your audiences as well.
And quick, with the AI craze going on.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Prompted does not mean it's your material. So if you prompted something, it gave you a great sticky quote that you think is awesome. It is now your responsibility to go put that in Google and search and see if it belongs to someone else. So because you prompted in AI and asked a specific question, guess what AI does? It goes out around the world and searches everything that's on the web and then answers your question. So even more reason. So I'm not saying don't use AI. I'm just saying if you get some good original content, or so you think, you've got to go check and make sure someone else isn't using that. And then maybe, and I'm not the expert here, but then maybe it is yours. But you've got to do the due diligence because it is your reputation. Mark Brown, final thoughts.
My final thoughts go back to the first question. Friends, do you attribute? I hope the answer is yes. We'll see you next week.
All right. And we're going to be doing an upcoming podcast on, is it too late to be great? Starting your speaking career later on. We're going to sit down and talk about that. So we'll see you next week. Please pass this on to presenters, speaker friends that you know. This is a great way to connect with Mark and me. If you want to join us, check out StagetimeUniversity.com. If you want to get coached by us, go to getaspeakingcoach.com. Pass it on. We'll see you next week.
Make sure you subscribe to our show.
Remember to subscribe, because if you miss a week, you miss a lot.
If you like this episode, please leave us a review. If you want to get more from Mark and Darren, check out Stage Time University, where they provide experienced presenters a proven path and world-class feedback to become the speaker everyone is talking about. Go to StagetimeUniversity.com. Join us next week. If you're going to take the time to prepare a presentation, make it unforgettable.
Hey there, this is Darren LaCroix. Thanks for checking out this podcast episode on YouTube. If you want all of them, not every one is on YouTube, check out your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode. Keep being a sponge so you can be unforgettable.
Check out StagetimeUniversity.com, where good presenters become unforgettable.